Hello and welcome to the Power Rock Podcast, where I'm speaking with the Quebecois punk rock personality. And this is going to be horrible French, but Émilie Plamondon, as also known as Punk Roquette, today about the recent surge in Canadian punk music and how she's become a bit of a punk celebrity and featured singer on some of the recent releases that have come out over the past few years. She also plays in not one, but two bands and still has a full-time job. I'm thinking her love of coffee is the only thing that allows her to make it through the day with all the things she's able to accomplish. We'll dig into the mind of Punk Roquette right after this.
You're listening to the Powered by Rock Podcast with your host, Isaac Kuhlman. The Powered by Rock Podcast was created to help showcase some of the best rock musicians in the world and to pass on to future generations the rock music that has inspired rock fans around the world for decades. We want listeners to be able to hear great stories and life experiences directly from their favorite artists, as well as dig deeper into music theory and talk rock like no other show you've ever heard. This isn't about looking cool, it's about getting real and having a great time. Without further ado, let's start the show.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Power Rock Podcast. I think today's going to be a pretty good show because I love talking to bands and musicians, but I also like speaking with guests who have other perspectives as well. Now, Émilie, I'm terrible with French, so she'll just have to let you guys know how it's pronounced here in a second.
Hi, my name is Émilie.
Yeah, there you go. She's a musician who plays in bands as well, but she also spends a lot of her time on the other side of the industry, kind of doing a little bit what I do as well, helping to spotlight, promote, and support the punk music scene across the world. And she's a bit of an ambassador for punk music in Canada. She's the host of the Punk Roquette Show podcast, that's a mouthful, and locally hosts Punk Détente in her home city of Quebec City, and plays in 50 Shades of Punk, which is a punk acoustic cover band, and has a new band called The Long Run that will be releasing new music soon. Hey, Émilie, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Yeah. little applause and cheering for yay. All right. So I'm sure that anyone who is watching this episode is probably more familiar with you than they are with me, because I think maybe like 3 or 4 of my friends watch this show regularly. So for those 3 people, they'll probably be like, who's Punk Roquette? But kind of let these 3 people that are going to watch this, that are my friends, and all the other people already know who you are that are going to watch this, but let them kind of know, how did you get into the life of being a podcast host, and how did you get kind of, into the spirit of supporting punk bands and everything?
Actually, I started to do radio shows when I was at the end of high school, but at this time I wasn't really into punk rock, but I had a very a cafeteria radio show in high school. Then I went to college. I started to listen to more punk rock, and I started a radio show in Quebec City called Punk Détente in 2004. So it's been like 18 years already. So that's how I started.
See here, this whole time I thought you were 22 years old.
Oh, thanks. No, I'm 38 and a half.
So just a couple years younger than me. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's talk about your bands as well, because I know that the one thing that, well, actually, let's back up, because you got into the radio show, but how did you then turn and say, okay, I want to kind of, because locally doing a radio show has so much spread, right? But then you can go even wider if you actually do something on the internet. How did you decide to do the Punk Roquette podcast show?
It's so funny because I started to do Facebook Live while I was hosting my radio show, but I'm hosting in French. Yeah. But then I started to do those lives on Facebook, and I saw that some punk rockers from all around the world started to just say hi, and so I started to speak English a little on those live, and then I was like, oh, I mean, maybe I can speak English.
Yeah.
So, and I spent like most of my years on my radio show focusing on my local scene, and I still love my local scene. Like, we can talk about my local scene for hours, but I was like, I wish I could interview like not necessarily bigger bands, but some people I admire since I'm a teenager, but also other local scenes, people around the world. So I was like, okay, maybe I can start my podcast. But I was super insecure at first. It took me like 2 years before I finally do it. So
see, I'm the opposite. I'm overconfident and have nothing to back it up. I'm like, let's start a podcast and see how it goes. All right. Well, it goes.
When I started my radio show, I was like that because I didn't know a lot about punk rock. I knew like, okay, Bad Religion exists. I know like 4 songs of NoFX, but I want to do a radio show about punk rock.
Yeah.
Like, and people used to call me, do you know Randy? And I was like, no, I don't know what Randy is. So I would like burn the CD for the next week with some requests. And then I learned a lot of bands. So, but at first,
I mean, like, there's so many underground bands from different pockets of like countries and parts of the world that they're like, oh, I grew up on the Living End in Australia. I'm like, yeah, well, they only had like 1 CD or 1 album that was kind of big in North America. So you can't expect everybody to know who they're. And by big, I mean, people who knew a lot about punk rock knew that album, but not everybody across the world is going to know that band or that album. So
yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
I just realized that so many bands around the world work so hard and they need more exposure. So I was like, maybe I can do what I do with my local scene, but with other local scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's kind of the thing. Like, I don't think anybody signs up for the business side of being in a band. They just sign up for, hey, I want to make music. I want to go play shows. I want to have fun. And they're like, oh, it's really hard to like do this, make money, and actually have people give a shit about it. So it's like, any help they can get, they're very appreciative.
Yeah. And I realized we're just a big family and everyone is so close to each other. I became friends with a lot of people I've never met yet because of music. So it's just fun.
Yeah. So talking about, bands and punk bands, let's talk about your 2 bands, because you have 50 Shades of Punk, which has played some somewhat big shows. And you've those are acoustic punk covers. I've heard like quite a few of them actually. Yeah. And then you were in a band called Excuse Me, Mister for a couple of years, where I think you also played some covers from memory, or maybe you had some originals, but and then you got another one called The Long Run, which is going to release new music soon. So kind of take me through your journey as a member of a band and how these bands have kind of formed.
Oh, you want me to talk to you about my first band ever when I was 17?
That's when I started my first band, like 16 or 17. Yeah.
But I want to talk about that because it's really funny. I used to say, I was like a guest vocal with that band when I was young. And those are the guys who got me into punk rock. So that's why I want to mention it. But like at some point, one of the guys didn't want me to stay in the band because I didn't look punk enough.
Yeah, that's how it usually goes.
But we stayed friends. It's fine. But now I'm just so happy to sing punk rock still, So it's just funny. But more seriously, I started to play with one of my friends at university. His name is Simon. We studied social work together. And we started to jam at parties. But when Tony Sly died, we decided to do a tribute to Tony Sly, and we did a show, and it was incredible. We played like 25 No Use for a Name songs, and we're like, oh, it was so much fun. Maybe we could do like 3 shows of different bands covers. Yeah, and it was still so much fun, and we were like, hey, let's do that. So we started 50 Shades of Punk Rock, and we're not playing a lot of shows, but we play in Quebec, in the province. Yeah, and at private parties. I think it's super fun to do that.
Yeah.
And at some point, I wanted to try to play instruments. So I wanted to play some acoustic guitar. And I met a friend, Valérie. She's a very great piano player. And we decided to do this band just for fun, just because we were 2 women in their mid-30s who wanted a new challenge. She wanted to start to sing, and I wanted to play instrument. I'm more confident about my voice, and she was more confident about her piano playing. So we were like, hey, let's have a challenge together. So we did like 5 shows, but then we had to stop. But we opened
because people said you're no good. No, I'm just kidding.
No, lack of time and too many projects.
Yeah,
it
sure.
was just, I think it was for the challenge.
Yeah.
And
I was
I
going to say,
already
if you had to stop because people are booing you at every time, then that's not a good sign.
True, maybe people didn't dare to.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think, didn't you open for Joey Cape on one of those shows
Yeah.
for that band?
Yes, and me and Valérie, we were like, this is not possible. We shouldn't do that. It's we're not qualified to do that. I remember all day I wanted to puke. I was just,
Yeah.
but it went pretty well. And I was like, okay.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
so-
Yeah. One of my favorite musicians of all time.
Yeah, Joey Cape is amazing. And then it's been a while since I tried to have my own full band, but it's really hard to start a full band.
Especially when you're not in your 20s or 19 or 18 anymore, when everybody's got free time, right?
So true. Exactly. Yeah. So true. And but it's my biggest dream to write my own song. I had a band when I was younger, but we were not serious. Like we were just having beers in a rehearsal space, and but now I was like, I have a lot of fun supporting other bands, but I just also want to have my band and know and understand what it is.
Yeah.
The feeling of working that hard and writing my lyrics, spreading my messages. So I started this band, and it's hard because we had some guys left already because they realized they didn't think they would have enough time. So it was really hard to start it. We're still looking for another member, but we have one song ready almost. It's on the mix, and we started like 3 others. So it's going to be pretty fast, but at the same time, we all have other projects. So
yeah. And are you doing the recording like at home and then or like self-recording?
For the first song, we went to a studio, but we did a lot here too. Yeah.
Gotcha.
With this mic.
Yeah. The one that doesn't work on StreamYard for some reason, but works on Zoom.
Yeah, I'm not a professional podcaster that much. So yeah, and I still want to keep my acoustic project with Simon. It's so much fun. We're gonna do a private show next in 2 months. We do a regular show next week, but I really want to rock on the stage. I want to try it for real.
Yeah.
Even if I'm not in my 20s anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think, what is it like? Amy from the Interrupters, I think she's around our age, and she's as good, or I mean, she's probably better than she's ever been on stage. So she's pretty incredible. Yes.
And I think when you're in your late 30s, you feel a little more confident, or you don't care that much anymore.
You block out all the horse shit that people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to be very, very intimidated, or it's recent since I start to have a little confidence for real. So
yeah.
But I think we should see more people over 40s, like.
Well, in punk rock, it's inevitable because we're all getting so old now that everybody's over 40.
Yeah, but for women, I think personally, I'm super happy to see Amy, Interrupters, the Bad Cop, and like a lot
Venomous
of other
Pinks
women.
And a lot of those.
Yeah, and I'm like, so it's still possible.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So that's enough about you. Let's talk about some Canadian punk rock today, because this is not that I don't want to hear everything there is to know about you, but you have your own podcast. You can talk about yourself all you want on that one.
Yeah, I always talk about what I'm drinking in the morning. Oh, I have a coffee right now. So
and I did see that you stopped drinking alcohol for the time being, which I might have to do that at some point, but I like drinking alcohol too much. It's just too hard not to. It's so fun.
Yeah, fun. I agree with that.
All right. Yeah, I know. So the main reason, obviously, we're here is to talk about Canadian punk rock, because I've been kind of saying it for the last year and a half, that Canadians seem to kind of be putting out more high quality punk rock albums right now than ever before. And maybe even to the point where they're kind of, some of these bands are surpassing their American counterparts for the first time in a long, long time. Bands like Handheld, we'll get into more, but the Morones, some of these bands are in Trash Ambulance. A lot of these bands are incredible. And you've actually even been able to feature as a guest vocalist on some of these projects, and we'll talk about that. So just as an overview, does it seem to you like over the last year or two, there's kind of a bit of a surge in Canadian punk rock music really putting out great punk rock, or am I just crazy because I've just kind of noticed these bands more lately?
No, I think you're right. I think a lot of those bands released albums like Handheld. They just made a comeback, so we kind of forgot about them for a while, and then they're back. Propagandhi, Comeback Kid released new albums. We have new bands in Quebec too. We have a great local scene. So no, I think you're right. There's some new bands too.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, you don't even need to have, because of Spotify and stuff like that, you don't even need to have like, a record label these days to be heard by other people. So I think that gives people a little bit more confidence to go out and do some recording. They're not going to make money off of Spotify, but they will at least get some visibility. They'll get some notoriety, maybe get put on some bills, some put on stages at like a Sonar Fest or the one Pooza Fest or whatever it's called there in Montreal.
I love the
people. So there's definitely things like that where if you get enough recognition, people talking about you, even if you're not getting paid by Spotify, you can get put on some of these places where you can actually eventually then make some money, right? So
and you mentioned the labels, but it's such a good point because we have great labels who support a lot of smaller bands. Like I'm thinking about Thousand Islands Records, People of Punk Rock. They all based in Quebec, and they encourage they encourage also like European bands and US bands, but also Canadian bands, and it's fun for fast skate punk bands to see that they can be supported by labels again, because Fat Records used to do that, but now they kind of changed the catalog and it's fine. But I think with all those labels options, it's interesting for a skate punk band to just believe it.
Yeah. And I think Fat Records, like you said, used to be like the premier skate punk. I mean, if you were like a punk band, you were like, I want to get signed to Fat Records. That's going to get me the best chance of like being popular.
Yeah.
Now it's like you could be on Wiretap, you can be on Thousand Islands, People of Punk Rock. There's so many of these other labels cropping up, and that's kind of where like the cream of the crop in this kind of era is. Obviously, Fat Records kind of has like this short and narrow list of bands that they're willing to prop up and bring back and release new music of. Yeah. But you don't see a lot of the new stuff coming from Fat Records anymore. It's always from these other, kind of ancillary labels that put out amazing stuff.
I was surprised when they signed Cigar, because Cigar is super fast skate punk, and I was like, oh, maybe they want to go back a little to this side.
Well, I think in Fat Records, they probably knew Cigar from back in the days when they lived in California. Well, they still live in California, but back in 1999 when they released their first album or whatever it was, and like, oh yeah, so you guys ever going to put out another album? And like 23 years later, they're like, oh, it's time to put out another album. So that was a bit surprising because they first of all like kind of disappeared and then came back, and then the new album was really good. I was like, well, holy shit, why haven't you guys been putting more music out lately? But
so good.
They're not Canadians, so we don't want to talk about them.
Yeah, you're right.
No,
but maybe seeing this, some Canadian bands can have some hope.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the best albums of the Canadian punk rock scene of 2022. And I did mention the three that I'll bring up, and I'll ask you to kind of bring up some other ones. But I know that personally, like I'm a huge fan of the Maroons, their new album, The Book of Maroon. Their cover of Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody was amazing. I was like, holy shit, like I can't believe you guys pulled that off.
Yeah, great.
I also like the songs Open Bar and Cable as well. The idea of staying in a relationship because somebody has free cable or you're getting free cable from them was pretty funny to me. We talked about Handheld, the Canadian Tragedy, probably, in my opinion, one of the top two or top three punk albums of this year. It's a tough one to pick kind of between all of them, but that would be high on my list. All the stories of, Canadian historical figures. But what are some of your favorites this year?
I really like this one for sure. Handheld is in my top for sure.
Yeah.
Totally. And you know what? I didn't know the Morons were Canadians.
Yeah, they're from, I want to say Alberta.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's pronounced the Maroons.
Maroons.
Yeah, umlaut there.
right.
I had to ask him
Yeah.
about it, but I was like, what do you mean,
I
morons?
strongly suggest you. One of my favorite too is a band from Quebec. It's Achigan, Achigan.
Okay.
The lyrics are in French. They are so good. It's fast skate punk with very powerful lyrics. So it's definitely in my top 3 of the year so far.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, I'll definitely, because I'll ask you for more recommendations later, because I know on your show you definitely talk about punk recommend. How do you say punk recommendations?
Recommendations.
Yeah, punk recommendations. That's it. Yeah. But yeah, and then I know that there's been other ones. Obviously, you talked about Trashed Ambulance. You were on that. But let's talk first about some of the maybe bigger ones, or maybe ones that people had on their radar. I know Pup's new album, The Unraveling of Pup the Band, was a big one. I've never got into Pup. I'm like, are they punk? I don't really know. Like, people still call them punk, but I'm kind of like, they kind of seem more indie, but everybody's like, they're a punk band from Canada. I'm like, okay, if you say so.
I can definitely hear some punk influences. I don't know why I'm not that into this band.
Yeah.
I think I should see them live.
Yeah. I think that's kind of part of their appeal, is because they pack every place that they play in. It goes crazy, but kind of like Turnstile, where I like Turnstile's music, but I don't like it as much as everybody else likes it. And I think it's because if you go to their show, you're like, okay, now it makes sense. But
yeah, you kind of get it at some point. But I think, and it's weird because Pop, for me, it sounds a little like Moneen.
A little emo.
And I love Moneen, but why don't I love Pop that much? I don't know.
Yeah.
But definitely it's because I need to see them live. So I promised myself that next time they'll be in town, I'll go.
Yeah. I had a side conversation with John from Punk Rock Radar about Pup, and he was like, he had mentioned like, how is this band so big all of a sudden? I was like, dude, I didn't even know that they were like famous. I just knew of them. And all of a sudden now they're selling out like not arenas, but like, you know, like concert halls across America and stuff. I was like, what is going on? Like, how does everybody know about this band all of a sudden? So I missed whatever was making them famous, and so did John, and I guess you have too.
Yeah.
Another one was Among Legends. Their new album, Take Good Care, pretty good. High energy punk for sure. A little kind of indie rock in there as well, but I would say it's a lot more punk. And then 22's new album was Dismissed. That was a lot of high energy, kind of fast skate punk as well.
I wanted to mention it because I totally agree. It's really good.
What did you think of that album?
Oh my God, it's from A to Z. It's just super amazing. And it's funny because they always tag me in all their stories. So I'm like, I know everything in real time.
Yeah. I was like, oh, don't forget to mention everything that we've told you.
I'm super happy because the technical fast punk is still alive, and it's definitely my favorite.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I remember like when NoFX first came out, for example, they weren't exactly like the high caliber musicians that they are these days. And, you know, by about the mid 90s, they kind of got there, but Fat Mike was singing like he was in Rich Kids on LSD, still thinking he was in RKL. Not very good vocals. It was hard to listen to some of that stuff. And then all of a sudden it switched. It became a lot more melodic. The band became faster. Smelly started playing incredibly technical drum stuff. And then everything was just like, and then you get these, solos from Eric Melvin and Hefe. I'm like, holy shit, what is happening right now? Like, these are like incredible. And then like all these other bands were just doing it too. And I was like, so you can make punk rock that fast and that good and still be punk rock. Cause it used to be like punk had to be simple. It's like, you can't hit cymbals. You can't have lead guitar solos. You just like scream and bang the drums as hard as you can. That was punk rock before that, pretty much. And it was like, okay, so now things are changing. And obviously with Green Day and all that stuff, it became pop punk, which was a twist off of that, I think, in a lot of ways. But I just think it's very interesting that, like you said, technical punk became kind of prominent, disappeared, became pop punk, and then came back, which a lot of people didn't think it was ever going to happen.
Came back with some like metal influences, and I really, really love this. It's just, I become in trance. Is it a word?
Yes.
Is it a word in English?
Yes.
Like, so so good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was released this year. No, it was last year. Damn it. Our Darkest Days. The band Our
Which
Darkest
one?
Days. The band is called Our Darkest Days.
Oh, Darkest Days. Yeah. Our Darkest Days. Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was last year. I thought it was this year.
I feel like they had an EP this year, but maybe that was last year as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I released some singles before the album, but I think it was at the end of last year. Snakes and Ladders. So good, but
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Already old.
Yeah. We're almost in 2023 now. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously you got to feature on a couple of new albums lately, and the new one that I want to talk about was Trashed Ambulance's Future Considerations, which you sang on the song Stalking the Park, which is a pretty funny concept about a drunk dude waking up in a park trying to hit on a woman who's married and definitely not drunk, just kind of watching her kid in the park. The album's really good too. I mean, Josh's vocals went from pretty average vocals to pretty good vocals on that album. So first of all, how'd you get to work with these guys from Trashed Ambulance, and how'd you like the album?
I knew them already because of my radio show. So we were friends. I knew him because of Paranormal Activities, the podcast.
Okay.
And so they asked me, and I was happy because I love to do some collabs with bands because I couldn't have my own full band. So I was like, oh, if bands want me to sing with them, I'll be very happy to sing on full band songs. So so they just asked me, and I said yes. Concept was amazing.
Yeah, of course they're all the way in like Red Deer, which is like by Edmonton in Alberta, which they don't probably come to Montreal or Quebec or anything like that anytime. But you ever see yourself being able to jump on stage and play with them at some point?
I hope so. And with Handheld too in December, probably. But Trash Ambulance, I saw them play in a very empty venue, like maybe 6 years ago at Le Scanner. It was so great, but it was really late.
Yeah, you love when you're like, man, this band's really good, and you look around and there's like 3 people drinking at the bar, not even paying attention. Like,
it happens often, and every time I'm ashamed. I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah,
come at the shows.
And that's how I talk about like my friends. I'll go to a show and then I'll be like, and I can't go to every show because there's so many shows, but when I go to a show, I'm like, oh yeah, there's like 10, 12, maybe 15 people here, and I'm like, I'll even invite like 10 people to come. And they're like, oh, I can't make it. I'm like, you can't make a free show. Well, how's that possible? Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, but some venues here start their shows at midnight.
Yeah.
And like you said, we're all over 40 in the crowd.
Yeah. And so how did you like the full album of Future Considerations by Trashed Album?
I always like their sound. Yeah, it's like, it's very, how can I say that? Raw punk rock. Like it's raw, simple lyrics, little party vibe.
Yeah.
For me, so not too serious, but still like interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't try to put out like 18-minute The Decline or anything like that. They just do like they're 3 to 4 minutes. You know, they got some humor in there. They got some party stuff in there, and then they got some.
Punk rock is also that. I need my punk rock with social topics and political stuff, but I also need my party punk rock. If I can say that.
Yeah, it can't all be serious, because then you just be like, man, I'm taking this way too seriously all the time.
Yeah, and punk rock for me, it's the both side of punk rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the world sucks. Let's party. So
let's talk about some of the other songs you've been featured on, because I know you worked with Double Negative, Wes Hoffman, and the Punk Cellist, and you worked with Down Memory Lane on one of their songs as well. So how are you trying to get on is it like a goal of yours to be on every Canadian band's album, or is this just kind of happening kind of naturally?
No,
you do guest vocals on every. It's like a contract. If they make a record, you have to be on their record now.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm too everywhere. I should focus on my own stuff. But they ask me, and I say yes because I love those people, and I couldn't have a band. So for me, it was like, oh, what a great opportunity. So yeah, it's more like that.
And then
point.
when the bands approach you about this, are the lyrics written already and you just kind of have to sing? Like do they give you like guide tracks to kind of like give you the melodies, or?
Sometimes I create my own melodies. Sometimes I adapt it.
Okay.
But I always tell them, send me the lyrics with the highlighted part, what you want me to do, and maybe a demo, you do it, and I'll do the same thing. But then when I'm recording it, I'm like, oh, can I try this? So I send them some samples with my phone. So I'm like, what do you have? And I send it. And they're like, okay, do it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I record it after.
Yeah.
So
oh, you can hit a high D. Okay, that's better than my version of it. Yeah.
or sometimes just for fun. What I really like, because I love to record stuff at home. Like I love to try stuff. I have a lot of fun doing this. So sometimes I just do 5 different things. I send them all and I'm like, do what you want with this.
Yeah.
Take whatever.
And I assume they're paying you heavily for these appearances, like sending you $10,000 checks every month or what?
Most of those are free because it's just fun.
Yeah. Well, I figured
if they offer, I'll take it. But
yeah.
for
hey,
me,
for $20,000. Oh yeah, I'll do that. I'll fly to wherever you're recording. I'll do it.
No, but I it's really for fun, and also I learn doing this. I improve, so it's kind of formation for me.
Yeah, exactly. And as we said before about getting on record labels and or not getting on record labels, but kind of touring and getting on Spotify, it helps with visibility, get you kind of your name a little bit more out there and stuff. So yeah. I was just curious because sometimes I hear when people do collaborations, they're like, oh, we'll send them scratch tracks, or we'll send them they'll just write a verse depending on what their approach is. So just curious what it has been so far for you.
But so far I think they have their idea in mind.
Yeah.
And I can adapt because sometimes it doesn't fit my range, so I have no choice. I have to propose something else.
Yeah.
But most of the time they just send me stuff and I just do it, and sometimes I back it a little, or I love to push. So sometimes I try different intensities.
Yeah. You going in there full rage mode and just screaming in the microphone?
Yeah.
Let's try this one, see if they like that. Okay.
Yeah, and these days I'm back at taking singing lessons, so I love to just try something I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, are there any Canadian punk bands that haven't put out an album in the last couple of years that you might be looking forward to, who are probably putting out new music soon that you know of?
Oh.
You get all the scoops.
Moneen are Canadian, right? Yeah.
You said Moneen?
Yeah. I
actually don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
The name sounds Canadian, but I don't know if they're actually from Canada.
Canadian, but I'm not.
They're probably from Maine.
I mean, I'm always happy to have Propagandhi's album for sure. It's always so powerful for me.
Yeah.
I love my band, my local bands in Quebec. One of my favorite bands called Les Vulgaires Machins are gonna release a new album, and they were on a hiatus for many years. So I was super pumped to hear that.
So have you copy and paste that name to me later, because I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm spell that.
I'm gonna send you some notes. Same for Achigan that I was talking to you a little before. A band that I wish. It's hard to say right now, but yeah, I'm always down for Propagandhi.
Yeah. I know that they didn't actually, and I was going to mention that they didn't actually release a new. I think they did 2019 was the last album they did.
In a while.
2017, I think, which was Victory Lap.
Yeah.
But they did have a bit of a comeback because I think they've kind of started touring a little bit from memory. I think I saw some shows that they were playing.
Yeah, I saw them at the Puzza Fest. Oh,
nice.
I love Propagandhi.
And I was going to say, all the Sum 41 and Avril Lavigne fans from the early 2000s and late 90s, I don't think anybody is probably more revered by Canadian punk scene members than Propagandhi. I think they're probably the most looked, idolized or looked after kind of Canadian punk band. I assume you probably listened to them a lot growing up.
Yeah, but I really got into Propagandhi maybe at university when I started to be interested a lot by political and social topics. Because, and you know, I speak French, so it's hard. Those lyrics are hard to understand when your English is not that good. It's and when I did the cover,
I mean, they got some big vocabularies in their songs.
Yeah, and you have to research sometimes.
And half the topics they talk about, you know, might not be like Rage Against the Machine. Like you might have to do a little research on what they're actually referring to because you're like, I'm not sure what you're talking about here. But okay, I'm with you. I don't know the whole story.
Exactly. So when I was younger, I couldn't really understand everything. And you know what's really funny, because the cover I made with Jan, the punk cellist, for Today's Empire, Tomorrow's Ashes, the lyrics, I think it took me like 5 hours to do the first verse because it's so fast.
Yeah.
Wasn't possible.
Yeah. I remember when I had a band in high school, one of the kind of members we had it for a short period of time, huge Propagandhi fan. And he was like, let's do a cover. And I was like, okay. And he picked the slowest one. It was like a slow song. It almost sounded like a slow dance. I can't even remember the name of the song off the top of my head, but I was like, well, thank God, because I'm not going to be able to sing most of this stuff that fast and remember all the lyrics. Song? Yeah. I can't remember. It was literally like
Elie Selassie.
Maybe, I have no idea. Like it came out probably in 98 and maybe 97, because we played it about a year after it came out. So this was, you know, most of my life ago at this point. I can't even remember what the song was, but I just remember we actually did, I think we played it live, or maybe we just played it so much that we had a routine where we were going to be like, because we played some kind of like Rage Against the Machine stuff. And this was like not a punk band, but then we throw this Propagandhi song in there that still has like a political message, but it sounds like a slow dance. So from memory, it was kind of like ironic in the way that the song worked. It was like political message set to like a slow dance or something like that. And so we're like, all right, everybody, like now it's time to, you know, grab your partner and slow dance while we're singing the song about whatever it was. And it was like, it was just pretty funny, but yeah.
Wow, I want to slow dance on Elie Selassie up your ass. Like,
yeah.
It's not really romantic, but
okay. It could be that one. It's just, I mean, it's been a long time.
Maybe it's another one, but
I know it was, man, this is a long time ago. Yeah.
Try to find it and tell me. I want to know.
I'll try to figure it out. I'll be like, oh yeah, that's it. Cause it was probably off of like their second or third album. That's how long ago it was. So anyway.
Could be this one.
Yeah. All right. So as a punk sentimentalist and fan yourself, do you think punk is coming back around, or have we actually hit the peak and it's kind of on the downslope now and slowly fading out already?
I mean, it's up to us. Like if we are keep clinging, is it a word?
Yeah.
On our old 90s punk bands from California, like Bad Religion, NoFX, Lagwagon. I mean, someday they're gonna retire.
Yeah.
Like NoFX just announced kind of.
Yeah, on Twitter, like in a Twitter comment.
Instagram comment.
Yeah, whatever it was, yeah.
But they kind of said that it might be over. So if our definition of punk rock is only Californian skate punk, it's going to die sooner or later. But if you want to stay aware of new bands, not only from California, even if like I love those bands, don't get me wrong, you know, I'll be sad when they all retire, or I don't know. So
they have to eventually, right? I mean,
it's been like fucking 40 years old, 40 years. So it's up to us if we want to keep discovering bands, and everyone should also focus on their local scene a little and encourage younger bands. So it's up to us, I should say. But no, the punk is not dead. Maybe it's okay to have a new era of punk rock.
Yeah. I think kids in high school right now need a kind of rediscovering. Like I actually talked to a band. They're all in high school and middle school right now, and they're like Green Day fans, Red Hot Chili Peppers fans. And I was like, how is that possible? That's like some of those bands were like even famous before I really even got into music. So they're old. They're really old. Like, how are you guys into those bands? But I think there are kids like that who have parents like me who are like, listen to this music. You're going to like this music. And so hopefully these things keep happening where, you know, there are bands that keep bringing these things back around.
Yeah. But I think the world is getting crazy a lot. It's insane. So people will always have something to say about it in some lyrics, which is really good for punk, I think.
Yeah.
But the crowd has to be there too, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of these days we're all just going to be looking back and look around the crowd and everybody's going to be like 50 years old and be like, maybe it's time to hang these ones up, but let's look around for other things. I think I can't remember, I think it was on a Lagwagon album where they had a quote from a movie, and I can't remember the movie, where it's like, you know, it's like they say when you're punking in your 20s or whatever, you're like, or you're a rebel in your 20s, you're like supposed to be like that. But if you're a rebel in your 30s, you're doing it all wrong or something like that. You're going to die or something like that. But yeah, I can't remember the quote exactly. I think it was from Let's Talk About Feelings, that album, but it's from a movie and I can't remember, but I'm like, that's kind of like punk rock in a nutshell. Once you get to like 40 years old, you don't feel like a punk anymore. You just really like the music, and you're like, why can't bands just make good music? Like, I would like to listen to the music and not have to fist fight somebody every time I go to a concert.
Oh yeah.
But so do you have any shows with I think you said you have some music with the Long Run coming out. When do you know when that's going to come out, or do you have an idea?
We have our first song at the mix right now, and so we're just excited. So we want to release the first song we have right away, and then we're gonna write more. But we already have the few songs that we can work on. But for an album, it's gonna take a long time because we're not even a full band.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very excited.
As I say, are you going to be playing like actual shows with the band? That's the whole hope, right?
Oh, that's my biggest dream. So of course, but I don't know when. Not this year for sure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, it's about to turn into freaking snow season there, so you're not gonna be able to like do a patio appearance or anything.
So I'm gonna be in this room writing songs.
For like 5 straight months.
Perfect. Yeah. But I'm very, very excited. I think I'm very happy about our first song. Yeah. Nice.
Something to look forward to for everybody who's a fan, obviously, because, you know, I think your voice in the punk scene, I think I've seen it in comments from your, you know, Instagram and stuff, where people are like, how can you be punk? Like, what are you talking about? Like, who are you that defines what punk is, you fucking idiot? But yeah, I think having a voice like yours in punk music just helps to acknowledge that there's other voices out there, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, and the funny thing is the punk music was not a white thing to begin with, but white people kind of just inherited it or took it over or whatever, made it theirs. And it's like, it's only white guys that can like punk music. I'm like, it's never been like that. But these people have that kind of gatekeeper mentality. So hopefully they can all fuck off.
Such a good point. Yeah. But I'm very lucky. I don't have a lot of shitty comments, for real. It's not really often. I have a good crowd, and no, I'm very lucky. But it's even one every month is too much. But I mean, gatekeeping is not good for punk rock, guys.
Yeah, I think even Punk Rock Radar posted something today, and we're recording this in September, but they had a guy who said, you guys don't know anything. You don't know anything about punk rock music. You guys are half idiots or something like that. And you act like you've never heard of the Ramones. Pick up a Sex Pistols tape. I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, that's the two bands you reference.
Some people are pretty angry at me because I don't know enough 70s punk, and it's true. Like, it's true. It's not my favorite. It's
hard to go back and listen to the recordings because they're just not great recordings, first of all, but then also the music is just so brash. It's more for the live scene. That's what they were trying to do, right? So like, you can't really capture a live Ramones show or a live Sex Pistols show when they go into a studio and record it, because it doesn't come out the same.
I acknowledge the huge influence, and I like it for real, but I just I started my journey with punk rock with 90s skate punk California, and that's how I started. And I got
Avril Lavigne, you can say it. She invented it in the first place. Everybody knows that.
No, but when back in the days, I was really happy to see a girl of my age doing that, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I love her first album.
Yeah. The thing is, I never thought it was punk music. I was like, why does everybody keep saying this is punk music? I just thought it was pop music with a kind of punk attitude. I was like, that's what it is, right? Like,
but at the time, I was starting to listen to punk rock, and I was into Blink 182, Americana of Offspring, Green Day. So it was like not that different. For some songs.
When I remember a lot of people like will say like, oh, I got into Green Day with Dookie, and I was like, it's funny because I actually knew of Green Day when Kerplunk came out, and Welcome to Paradise was the single off that, and I was like, great song. And then Dookie kind of came out and it blew up, and I was like, it's a great album. But like, I was always more of a fan of like the grunge music at the time. And so then I kind of snuck in the back door of punk music when like other bands started coming in, like No Effects, Lagwagon. And I was like, these kind of seem like more like my kind of bands. Cause for some reason, and of course I didn't know that every punk band at the time seemed to be on heroin, but when you could tell that a punk band was on heroin, I was like, I don't want to follow that band. And Green Day, I could tell at some point had been like strung out, and they have like lyrics about it, and especially in their Insomniac album. But I was like, they just look like they need to go to sleep and get off drugs. And I was like, for me, it was like punk music wasn't that, even though for a lot of people it was, and they took it, amplified it, made it more of a melody. And I was already kind of enjoying like Weezer and Nirvana over here, and then liking some underground like No Effects at the time. And I just think it's funny that everybody's like, yeah, Green Day is how I got into punk. And I was like, really? That's interesting, because they were never a big influence on me, like in any form or fashion. I mean, I will say that I truly started to like pop punk when Blink 182 Damn It came out, right? So like right before Animal Estate. And I was like, oh, this is like perfect. Like this is the perfect example of the kind of pop or the punk music that I want. And then lo and behold, it turned out everybody wanted that at that time, because the next year they released Enema of the State or whatever 2 years later, and they were like the biggest band in the world for a while. It was crazy.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so. Anyway, I digress, but it's always interesting to hear how people kind of come up and find punk music, because especially when you live in like nowhere cities like I did in North Dakota, in the middle of nowhere. There's not bands touring through there. You don't hear of bands on the radio. It's not something that's mainstream. So you have to hear about it through like, creaks and cracks and stuff.
And I was, before that, I was into very pop stuff like Spice Girls, Backstreet Boys.
Me too. No, not really. But I did like Boyz II Men and Ace of Base when I was in grade school. So that was kind of like where I first was like, oh, Ace of Base, that song's awesome.
Yeah, I love that.
But
I'm not ashamed.
Yeah. I still think I call them the sweetest sensation. They're an amazing group. Anyway, we'll add some show notes below this episode to like your music, to your podcast, to I don't know if you have like you have the radio show. I know you do the Facebook Lives. Do you have like the actual airing like of it online somewhere? Or?
Yes, it's in French. So what I do is when I do the Facebook Live, I record my radio
vocals,
show.
audio,
So I present some recommendations that I find. I take some requests. That's the fun part. Like people are like, play some No Effects, or do you know this band? I'm like, no, I don't know this band. Let's play it.
Yeah.
So I record it. I send it to the radio station. So it's like the best of both worlds. I'm talking to everyone who's happy to build the playlist with me, and it's the radio show. So I speak French between songs. Yeah,
I noticed that. I'm like, I have no idea what the hell she's saying right now.
People can listen if they want. It's just that they won't necessarily understand what I say.
Yeah, and I'll say my demographic is not French, but some of yours might be. So at least maybe if they don't know of the radio show, they can go find that as well.
Or they can join me almost every Sunday night at 6:30 from 7:30 East on Facebook and Instagram Live, and I translate after what I say.
Yeah. Cool. One last question before we sign off today. What new music, one album, one artist, whatever, something from this year would you recommend people go check out right now?
I would say Achigan. Sorry, I'm back at it. But
Okay.
Achigan. If you're curious to hear some Quebecois lyrics, and if you want, you can translate the lyrics. But it's a fantastic album, and you can know more about the Quebec province, Quebec City, because they are talking a lot about local topics.
Nice.
The music is great. So that's
Excellent.
that's probably my favorite so
Again,
far.
I'll have you send it to me, copy and paste it, because I'll
Oh,
never be
sure.
able to figure out what you're actually saying to be able to type it into Google.
Normal.
I'll be like, I'll try to play it and say, Google, what is this saying? And then I'll translate it.
Achigan is it's a type of fish.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Achigan. I don't know if it's the same.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll put that in the link to that band as well in the show notes as well, so that way people can go check it out for sure. I don't want to mess up your name again, so I'll say I want to thank today's guest, Punk Roquette, for being on the show today. Émilie Plamondon, something like that.
You're good. That's perfect.
Cool. So thank you again for being here. This was an awesome conversation. Hopefully, guys, you got some recommendations from somebody in Canada about Canadian punk rock. We'll get all those kinds of recommendations below as well. If you want to obviously see any of the stuff that she's doing, go to those links for her music, her podcast, her radio show. Check her out. Go follow her on Instagram. Go follow her on Facebook. Don't follow her in real life because that's fucking creepy. So don't do that. But yeah, I think it's a matter of time before, the long run, we'll probably start picking up some steam. People will start listening to that as well. And guys, remember that the Powered by Rock podcast is powered by our listeners. If you want to show us some support, please be sure to subscribe and share the podcast on social media. You can also make a donation to the podcast as well to help us keep making awesome episodes with awesome guests like Emily here. God damn it. I'll never get it right. But you can find that link in the notes as well. You can see the full video interview on our YouTube and Spotify now as well. If you want to check out some of our articles, album reviews, lists, and interviews, go to poweredbyrock.com and check out our absolutely free rocking blog. Also, you can find our merch and gear so you can pick up some items to play and look like a rock legend. That's our show for today. Until we see you soon for the next episode, rock on.
Supposed to be